Hello and welcome to the pilot for Historier, a podcast that explores the etymology of Norwegian words and their relationship to other languages. This podcast is also offered in a video form, which includes data visualization, so do check it out on YouTube if you are more of a visual learner. Some sections include 3D audio, so for the best experience, I recommend headphones. I'm your host Parminder, a British Indian guy living in Norway. While learning Norwegian, I was continually amazed by just how similar Norwegian and English were, which inspired me to look up the etymology of everyday words whenever I had the chance. I was often able to find cognates in Old English, Latin, Greek, and even Sanskrit, which made them easier to remember. Some words had fascinating stories behind the etymology, which is why I named the podcast Historier, which means word stories. Now I know what you're thinking. How can a word even have a story? Let me walk you through one example, bjørn, the Norwegian word for bear. If we work backwards, the ancestor of bjørn is Old Norse bjorn, and the ancestor of bear is Old English bera. If we take one more step backwards, we arrive at Proto-Germanic bero. Proto-Germanic is the reconstructed parent language of all the Germanic languages, and is thought to have been spoken around 500 BC in Scandinavia. The next step backwards is Proto-Indo-European, or PIE for short. It's the reconstructed ancestor of all the Indo-European languages that was spoken around 3000 BC, somewhere in the steppes. This particular root word, pronounced something like berg, is the source for the Norwegian word brun and the English word brown. That means the words bjørn and bear mean something akin to the brown one. On the surface, it might appear strange, but in many cultures there's an idea that saying the name of a powerful entity summons it. For example, the phrase, "Speak of the devil and he doth appear," or how Voldemort is he who must not be named. This linguistic quirk is found in a variety of languages. In Finnish, the bear's name means rough or coarse, while in Latvian, it means stomper or pounder. Sometimes the bear has a name with a positive connotation. In the Slavic languages, medved means honey eater, and in the Celtic languages, the bear is called a variation of good. Finnish has another word meaning honey paw, and in India, bhalu means auspicious or favourable. However, there were other cultures that retained the actual word for bear. Latin ursus, ancient Greek arctos, and Sanskrit raksha. By analysing historical sound changes, linguists figured out the original word for bear could have been something like chatkos. If we analyse those words, especially those from Greek and Latin, they can often be found hidden in everyday language, poetic expressions, or scientific contexts. Latin Ursus gives us the constellation Ursa Major, or the Great Bear, with the plough or Big Dipper forming the tail and back end of the bear. Ancient Greek Arctos means bear, but also the north because of the constellation. From Arctos, we derive the word Arctic, meaning of the bear, and Antarctica, meaning roughly opposite the bear. There's also Arcturus, meaning guardian of the bear, the fourth brightest star in the night sky. The Latin and ancient Greek words appear together in the scientific name for the brown bear, Ursus arctos. Welsh Arth gives us the name Arthur, as in King Arthur. And finally, Beowulf, the most famous Old English poem, translates to Beowulf, or in other words, a bear. So, with a little bit of historical context, it's easy to identify cognates of ordinary words and additionally develop a better understanding of how our ancestors saw the world. Before we begin with our topic, a quick disclaimer. I have a B2 in Norwegian. Well, I've got a B1 in writing, but let's not talk about that. So while I am comfortable with Norwegian, I am not a native speaker, so my pronunciation won't be 100% accurate. Neither am I a linguist. I'm just a language enthusiast. A langthusiast, if you will. Yeah, let's go with that. This episode's theme is Høst, or the season of autumn. Autumn derives from Latin autumnus. In the USA, autumn is called fall, a reference to the leaves falling down, as opposed to spring, when the leaves spring forth. In Europe, the clocks change on the last Sunday in October, and if you find yourself confused by which way they should go, you can use the phrase spring forward, fall back. Høst is cognate with Old English harfest, which later became harvest. So when exactly is Høst? In Norway, the definitions are a little different to the UK and the USA. If we use the calendar, Høst is defined as the months of September, October, and November. Astronomically, it's the period between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, and meteorologically, it's when the average temperature is between 0 and 10 degrees Celsius. That means that in certain parts of Norway, for example Bergen, it's never, technically speaking, winter. Now that we've defined Høst, let's explore some compound words. And if there's one thing Norwegians love, aside from bureaucracy, alcohol, and brown cheese, it's compound words. Høst is the basis for å høste, to harvest, Høstfarger, autumn colours, Høstluft is autumn air, which has a fresh, sharp quality, Høstmørke is autumn darkness, Høstjevndøgn, the autumn equinox, An interesting note is that jevndøgn means even day, while equinox means equal night. As most cultures before the Industrial Revolution were largely agricultural, the harvest was a crucial time, and a bountiful harvest was worth celebrating. In England, there's the Harvest Festival. In the US, there's Thanksgiving. Halloween was based on a Celtic harvest festival, and in my culture, there's Vaisakhi, a spring harvest festival. Children often assisted their parents with shepherding, caring for livestock and harvesting during the warmer months. That meant the earliest they could begin school would be in the autumn, which is why in many countries the school year starts around then. In English, we use the phrase back to school, but in Norwegian, it's the compound Skolestart. In the UK, the autumn half-term is an innocent one-week break, but in Norway, the Høstfarger, or autumn holiday, was once known by another name. Potetferie, literally potato holiday. Post-World War II, Norwegian children had time off school to either help their parents harvest potatoes or, unbelievably, wait by the side of the road to be picked up by farmers as cheap labour. The reasons for this are because of rationing and the arrival of the første nattefrost, or first frost, which would severely damage the potatoes, so it was crucial that they were out of the ground at the right time. While we're on the subject, let's talk about farming. The Norwegian word for farm is gård. If it sounds familiar, you'd be right. It is in fact cognate with English garden. The original Pi root, gharth, meant to enclose or encircle. In the Indic languages, this became Sanskrit gara, which in turn gives us Punjabi ghar, meaning house. In Norwegian, we can derive the aforementioned gård, meaning farm, gjerde, meaning fence, which are both cognate with English garden and American English yard. Jordbruk is a compound word meaning agriculture. Jord is cognate with earth, and just like English, refers to both the soil and the planet. Agriculture is a Latin compound word meaning field cultivation. The first part, ager, is cognate with ancient Greek agros, Norwegian åker, and English acre. Avling is the Norwegian word for crop, which in Old English meant the head or top of a plant. Crop is cognate with Norwegian kropp, which means a human body. Our last farming word is corn with a K, meaning grain. In Old English, the word for grain was corn with a C, and survives in words like sweet corn or popcorn. Corn is related to Norwegian kjerne and English kernel, both meaning core. All this talk of farming is making us tired, so let's find a place to relax and talk about how Norwegian culture embraces the colder months. The word hytte, a cornerstone of Norwegian culture, comes from Middle Low German høyde, which is cognate with hut. Once we're inside, let's light a fire. The English word fire has a Norwegian cognate fyr. Both are cognate with ancient Greek pyr, from which we get pyre, as in a funeral pyre, and several words that begin with the prefix pyro, for example, pyromania. There is also ill, which doesn't have a modern English cognate, but there was one in Old English, aled, which is cognate with Old Norse elder. A ball translates to a bonfire, which itself is a compound word meaning bonfire. Both England and Norway had a bonfire tradition during midsummer for St. John the Baptist. However, in England, the tradition died out. In Norway, it continues to this day with the name Sankthansaften. A brann is a fire that is out of control. Brann is cognate with the English word brand, the burning of a mark into the flesh of animals or humans. We like our fires to be under control, so let's light one in the peis, or fireplace. Peis comes from the Middle Low German word pisel. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel hungry. So let's make Norway's nasjonalrett, or national dish, fårikål. It's a simple but flavoursome stew associated with autumn that consists of lamb, cabbage, potatoes, salt and pepper. Fårikål translates to sheep and cabbage, but there's a small problem. Får isn't the Norwegian word for sheep, it's actually Danish, meaning Norway's national dish is indeed Danish. Having said that, a study found that Danish is so incomprehensibly difficult that Danish children know 30% fewer words at 15 months old than Norwegian children. So I am genuinely thankful that I'm learning Norwegian. Kål comes from Latin kaulis, meaning stem or stalk. In Norwegian, it's found in blomkål, cauliflower, kålrot, rutabaga, knutekål, kålrabi, rosenkål, Brussels sprout, hodekål, cabbage, grønkål, kale, and surkål, sauerkraut. In English, there are a couple more, collard and coleslaw, the latter of which is via Dutch. It even found its way into the Indic languages via Portuguese as gobi. So the fireplace is going, we've had some fårikål, we've thrown on some wool clothing, and we're enjoying a nice cup of tea. This snuggly coziness is an important element of how Norwegian culture handles the colder months, exemplified in the expression å kose seg, or to enjoy yourself. That was very Norwegian. Å kose seg. The etymology is a bit uncertain, but kose is thought to be related to German kosen and English cozy. Related words include innekos, which is really hard to describe, but it's something like interior coziness, koselig and hyggelig, which approximate to nice and pleasant, and lun, which is similar to koselig but has a distant Scottish English cognate lone, meaning calm. We're nice and warm now and the sun has come out outside, so let's head out and admire the Høstfarger, or autumn colours. In Norwegian, the adjective form varies depending on the gender of the associated noun, so I'm using the masculine form for ease of comparison. The Pi root for rød, meaning red, has many descendants, including the Germanic word rust. From Latin there's rouge, rue, ruby, rubella, and the river Rubicon. From ancient Greek we derive the prefix erythro. For example, erythrocyte means red blood cell, and erythema means skin redness. In Norwegian, a rød dag, or red letter day, is a public holiday, which is a tradition from antiquity when holy days on a calendar were actually written in red. If you've ever wondered whether the colour orange or the fruit orange came first, you're about to find out. Orange is a word that originates in India. It was originally a South Indian compound word meaning fragrance fruit, which entered Sanskrit, Persian, Italian, and Old French before shortening to orange and entering Norwegian. The next two words are a little confusing. Gul, meaning yellow, and gull, meaning gold. They both come from the same Pi root, something like grelr. Yeah, that's really weird, which meant both green and yellow. This root gives us ancient Greek chloros, which in turn gives us chlorine, cholera, and chlorophyll. Let's head to the forest for some shinrin-yoku, the Japanese practice of forest bathing, which has been demonstrated to boost the numbers of natural killer cells by up to 50%, according to one study. In English, there is a distinction between a forest and a wood, with a forest being typically larger and more dense than a wood. Forest itself originally meant a royal hunting ground. Skog and skog are the Norwegian words for forest. English wood, as in the material, has a Norwegian cognate ved, which means firewood. In Norwegian, the material wood is tre, which confusingly is also the word for a tree. In summary, skog means forest, ved means firewood, and tre means both a tree and the material wood. Tre comes from a Pi word doru, from which we can derive ancient Greek dendron and Persian derakt, which in turn gives us Punjabi drakt. Latin arbor comes from a different Pi root. Trees can be løvfellende, literally leaf falling, meaning deciduous, or eviggrønn, evergreen. Blad means an individual leaf, and løv, which is cognate with leaf, means both the leaves from deciduous trees and foliage. In English, we still describe individual strands of grass as blades. On the side of the path, you spot some sop or mushrooms. Mushroom comes from an Old French word meaning something like moss fungus. Å means to collect or gather something. You can also potentially use å plukke, which is cognate with to pluck or pick. You hear a rustling from above and see a bird join others in flight heading southwards. A migratory bird is called a trekkfugl. The first part is from Middle Low German trekken, and the second is cognate with English fowl, which is still used in some bird names. In the distance you hear some gunfire. Autumn is prime time for hunting, and å jakte, to hunt, comes from Middle Low German jakt. This particular forest is known for its elg, which is elk in English and moose in American English. Like the bear, the elg is named after a Pi root for a colour, hel, which means grey or brown. As it is the largest animal in Norway, it must have had some cultural significance, because this rune, named Algiz, is thought to be named after it. Even today, in Norway, the elg is known as the Skogens konge, or king of the forest. When Stor-Elgen was unveiled in 2009, Norway had the world's largest elk statue at 10.3 metres, taking first place from Canada's Mac the Moose. In 2019, those sneaky Canadians increased the size of the antlers and raised the height to 10.36 metres, taking the top spot again. Our walk must be cut short, however, because you spot a brown insect flying in short bursts towards you. It's the dreaded hjortelusflue, literally deer louse fly. It's a blood-sucking insect that is active between approximately August and October. Its natural host is the deer family, but because they were designed by Satan, they can bite humans. If you're lucky to see it when it lands on you, you could try crushing it, but it takes quite a lot of force. While you're doing that though, a swarm of them will have landed in your hair, and if one bites you, there's a chance you'll develop an itch that will last up to a year. The reason I know that is because it happened to me. You have been warned. That's all for today. Did I miss anything? What did you think about the episode? Are there any topics you want me to cover? Let me know in the comments. This podcast was written, recorded, filmed and edited by me, with input and suggestions from Marianne, Camilla and Linn-Mari from Strømsø Frivillig, and Siv, Fredrik and several volunteers from Drammen Røde Kors Norsk Trening. I also want to give a shout out to my former Norwegian teachers from Sarpsborg, Maria, Stine and Ellen, and finally my extremely patient wife, who helps me with fact-checking and pronunciation. You can find me on social media under Parminder Gill Visuals or Parminder Gill Music. If your wallet is feeling a little heavy this month, you can become a channel member or donate to my Patreon, the details of which are in the description. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.